The signal came from nowhere. That was the first strange thing. No ship registration, no species marker, no Union flag, just a low, steady pulse moving through deep space like a heartbeat with nowhere to go. The listening post on the edge of explored territory caught it, logged it, and flagged it for review. Nobody reviewed it for 6 months. When they finally did, the analyst who opened the file stared at the audio waveform for a long time and then wrote 3 words in the notes field: not a machine. That file was quietly buried. Nobody wanted to deal with what it meant. Out past the old draconi homeworld, where the star burned dim and red and the asteroid belts moved in slow, ancient circles, something lived in the ruins. She had made a home out of broken things, which was fitting because she was the last of a broken people. Her name was Ruer. She was young by draconi measure, barely past the hatching stage, which in galactic years meant she had existed for roughly as long as it took most species to finish their basic schooling. Her scales were the color of deep water catching starlight, shifting between blue and violet, and a silver so bright it looked lit from inside. Her wings, when she spread them, caught the light of the red dwarf sun and turned it into something that looked like stained glass hanging in space. Her eyes were large, pale gold, and always a little too still, the eyes of something that had spent years watching without being seen. She was, by nearly every metric that mattered to the known galaxy, the most beautiful living creature anyone had ever recorded. She was also completely, utterly alone. The homeworld below her was dead, not dramatically dead, no explosion, no war ruin, not exactly, just empty. The draconi had been a small people even in their time, and time had not been kind to small peoples. The planet had forests and oceans and weather systems that ran on perfectly well without anyone to notice them. She went down sometimes to walk in those forests. The trees did not run from her. Most things ran. She had tried early on to make contact with the Galactic Union. It had seemed like the right thing to do. She had watched their transmissions for 2 full years before attempting it, learning their languages, their customs, the proper forms of greeting. She had even composed a short message in 4 different dialects. The first delegation she approached scattered before she could speak. The second got close enough for her to see their faces before the screaming started. The third, a Union diplomatic shuttle she had intercepted on a perfectly reasonable vector, wings folded, posture low, every signal she knew how to send pointing to I mean no harm. The third had nearly shot her. The crew had not made a conscious decision to fire. Their hands had found the weapon controls on their own, the way hands do when the body's oldest fear takes over and thinking stops being part of the process. She had pulled back, she had watched the shuttle shake as it fled, and she had understood, for the first time in a clean and terrible way, that this was not a problem she could solve by being more careful or more polite. The galaxy was not afraid of what she did, it was afraid of what she was. That was the year she stopped trying. She spent her time instead learning. She intercepted broadcasts, news, entertainment, scientific logs, trader chatter, the long meandering personal messages people sent to family across star systems. She learned 32 languages, then 40. She learned that the Galactic Union was debating whether to classify her formally as a Class 7 navigational and biological hazard, which meant they knew she existed, and had decided that numbing the fear was easier than facing it. She learned that a Luarani counselor named Sefer had twice tried to raise the question of draconi sentient rights and had been voted down both times. She learned what loneliness felt like in 43 different languages and found that none of them had a word for the specific kind she carried, the loneliness of being seen by everyone and known by no one. She was watching a particularly dull Union shipping report on her long-range receiver when the small craft drifted into her territory. It was not impressive. It was a maintenance shuttle of clearly human manufacture, identifiable by the uneven patch welds on the hull and the fact that someone had written SOLARA 9 MAINT, 4 on the side in large, slightly crooked letters using what appeared to be a paint marker. It was moving at a low, unhurried speed, its sensor array rotating slowly like it was looking for something specific and not in any particular rush to find it. It did not slow down when it entered the range where her presence would register on standard sensors. It did not change course. It did not begin broadcasting a distress signal or an evacuation alert or any of the other 11 things she had learned to expect from ships that noticed her. It simply came closer, corrected slightly for a piece of debris she had been using as a resting perch, and stopped. The engines idled. A hatch on the side opened. A figure in a worn work suit leaned out into the vacuum, tethered, practical, in no apparent hurry, and looked directly at her the way someone looks at a piece of equipment they have not encountered before but are fairly confident they can figure out. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice came through on the open band, the same casual frequency the maintenance workers used to talk to each other across hull sections. He said, "You're a lot bigger than the survey report said." A pause. "You mind? I need to check your wing membrane. I think you clipped my sensor array on the way past." Ruer had 43 languages and 4 years of silence behind her. She had absolutely no idea what to do with this. His name was Dean Calloway, and he was, in his own words, not particularly qualified for any of this. He was the sole active crew member on Outpost Solara 9, a refueling and relay station that existed mainly because someone had done the math and decided this stretch of deep space needed a waypoint for supply ships, even though supply ships rarely came this way anymore. The rest of the crew rotated through stasis in shifts of 3 months. Dean had drawn the short end of the schedule twice in a row, which was why he was the one floating in a work suit outside a hatch at the edge of known space, speaking calmly to the most remarkable thing he had ever seen. He was not calm because he was brave. He was calm because he had been alone on that outpost for 11 weeks, and his capacity for dramatic reaction had been almost entirely worn away by boredom and maintenance tasks. Also, she was not doing anything threatening. She was just floating there, very still, watching him the way he imagined something watched things when it was used to things running away before it could get a good look at them. He checked the sensor array. One of the secondary receivers had a fresh impact scratch. He photographed it, made a note in his log, and then turned back to her. "It's fine," he said, because her eyes had not left the scratch. "Minor, I can fix it in about 20 minutes. He tilted his head. "Do you actually understand me?" A long pause. Then, in perfect galactic standard, with only the faintest trace of an accent that sounded like wind over open water. "Yes." Dean nodded slowly. "Right, good." He looked at the scratch again, then back at her. "I read a bit about draconi in an alien anthropology survey. Old text said you were extinct." "Almost," she said. "Almost is different from actually." He began moving back toward the hatch. "Come closer if you want, I don't bite." A pause. "I assume you could, but I figure you'd have done it already." She followed him at a careful distance, wings folded so tight they were almost invisible against her body. She did not know why she was following. She had not made a conscious decision to. Something about the complete absence of fear in his movements made her feet, all 4 of them, start moving on their own. The conversation happened the way conversations do when both parties have gone a long time without one. Slowly at first, then all at once. She learned that Dean had been on the outpost for 11 weeks, that he was a maintenance engineer by training, which meant he spent most of his working hours fixing things that should not have broken and occasionally breaking things that should have kept working. That he had read the draconi survey text because the outpost's library was extremely limited and he had exhausted every other option. That he found her, in his own measured phrasing, objectively remarkable, which he said with the same tone he used when describing a well-engineered coupling joint, and which she found somehow easier to receive than any more elaborate compliment would have been. She told him she had been living near the homeworld for 4 years. He did not say "I'm sorry" or "that must have been so hard" or any of the things she had heard in intercepted transmissions when species expressed grief at each other. He just nodded and said, "4 years is a long time to talk to yourself." "I talked to recordings," she said, "intercepted broadcasts." "Still talking to yourself, just with extra steps." He handed her what appeared to be a thermal container. It's warm. I don't know if your biology does temperature the same way, but it's approximately T. She took it carefully. She had 3 claws on each forefoot. The container looked extremely small in them. I taught myself your languages from broadcasts, she said. All of them. I wanted to be able to say hello if I ever had the chance. You taught yourself 40+ languages on the off chance someone wouldn't run. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that's either the most determined thing I've ever heard or the most sad. Might be both. Probably both, she agreed. They were still talking when the outpost's automated system registered her biological signature and made its own decision about the situation. Dean saw the alarm light blink on his wrist panel and swore under his breath, one short, feeling word, and moved immediately to cancel it. He was fast. He was not fast enough. The distress ping had already transmitted. Tight beam, automated, routed directly to the nearest Union military relay. He stared at his wrist panel. She watched him. How much trouble is that? She asked. Depends on who picks it up. He pulled up the relay map on his panel. The nearest fleet is Admiral Warren's patrol group. Warren is, he paused, choosing words with visible care. Warren is the kind of person who sees something he doesn't have a protocol for and immediately starts writing a protocol that assumes the worst. Ruer understood this perfectly. The Union had been writing protocols about her for 4 years without ever speaking to her. Should I leave? She asked. Dean looked at the relay map. He looked at her. He thought about the 43 languages and the 4 years and the very small thermal container she was still holding carefully in 3 claws. No, he said, the cargo bay is big enough. I think we'd need to take out the center struts. He was already moving. Come on, I'll show you where the tools are. She followed him inside, and for the first time in 4 years, a door closed behind her and she was not alone on the other side of it. The center struts came out in 40 minutes. 3 conduit bundles came out by accident when Ruer's left wing caught them on the way through the cargo bay door, and she apologized each time with such careful sincerity that Dean started keeping count. By the time she was settled, sprawled across the cargo bay floor in a way that somehow managed to be both enormous and careful. She had apologized 7 times, and he had fixed 5 things and declined the apology for the other 2 on the grounds that they had already needed fixing. Living with a dragon, he was discovering, was less dramatic than advertised. She did not breathe fire in enclosed spaces, she told him. She had very good control over that. He said that was considerate. She said she had learned the hard way, which was the first time in their acquaintance that she said something and he decided not to ask a follow-up question. They played cards. He taught her a human game involving numbers and small illustrated rectangles, and she beat him 4 times in a row. He accused her of using some kind of spatial intelligence that was genuinely unfair. She pointed out that the game did not prohibit spatial intelligence. He agreed this was technically true. She told him about the navigation methods the draconi had used, ancient techniques, mapped by feel as much as by calculation, following the particular way gravity bent around old star formations. He listened closely and asked questions that were specific enough that she had to think before answering them. Afterward, he sat very still for a moment and said, "That is more accurate than anything we are currently using, and we have been using what we have for about 200 years. She said, "I know, I mapped it against your charts. You drift by about 4% over long distances." He said, "I want that on record." She said, "I do not think anyone will believe you." He said, "Probably not, but I want it on record anyway." This was, she thought, a very human impulse. She was starting to collect them. The fleet signal arrived on the 4th day. Not a message, just the electromagnetic shadow of something big dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Dean picked it up on the sensors and cross-referenced it against Union fleet registrations and found Admiral Warren's patrol group sitting at the edge of his sensor range like a very large and unwelcome weather system. He said the same short feeling word he had used when the distress ping went out. Then the stasis system chose this particular moment to run its scheduled rotation. A warning sounded through the outpost, 3 low tones, the kind that said something is changing and you should be aware of it. From the stasis bay came the specific hiss and mechanical complaint of a pod cycling open. Warden Grull emerged from stasis the way most people emerge from stasis. Badly. He sat up, blinked at the ceiling, ran a diagnostic on himself that mostly checked his weapon inventory, and then noticed through the cargo bay window that there was a dragon in the cargo bay. He stood up very fast. He also crossed to the cargo bay with very fast steps, checked the seal on the door, checked it again, and then activated his communicator to reach Dean. "Calloway," he said. His voice had the flat, compressed quality of someone keeping it extremely controlled. "There is a draconi in the cargo bay." "Yes," Dean said. "Why is there a draconi in the cargo bay?" "Because the cargo bay was the only space big enough." Dean arrived in the corridor outside the bay a moment later, tools still on his belt. "She fits. We had to take out the center struts, but structurally, the bay is fine." Grull stared at him. He was a large man by human standards, wide-shouldered, with the kind of face that expressed suspicion as its default setting. He had been Solara 9's security warden for 6 years. He had protocols for 14 different species-related incidents. None of the protocols included Dragon in Cargo Bay, apparently playing cards. "That," he said, pointing at Ruer through the window, "is a Class 7 hazard." "She has not done anything hazardous," Dean said. "She apologized for clipping my sensor array. She also beat me at cards 4 times, but that's arguably my fault for teaching her." "The Union has a standing flag on draconi contact." "The Union has a recommendation on draconi contact. It's not a binding order. I checked." Dean had, in fact, checked this twice because he had expected this conversation. "As the only active crew member at time of first contact, my authority on current operational decisions is senior to a warden waking from a non-emergency rotation." Grull's jaw moved. No words came out for several seconds. "Then Warren's fleet is in this system." "I know. And you invited a Class 7 hazard into the cargo bay." "She had nowhere else to be." Dean's voice was patient, unhurried. "Grull, she speaks 40-something languages. She has been alone for 4 years. She has not harmed anything. The most dangerous thing she has done since arriving is beat me at cards." Grull looked through the window again. Ruer looked back at him. She made no threatening move. She simply looked. Even through the window, even knowing intellectually what he was seeing, Grull felt the pull of it, the ancient, wordless thing that happened in the chest, and said, "Run." He gripped the door handle to keep himself steady. "I'm contacting Warren," he said. Dean had expected this too. He stepped aside and let him. Through the cargo bay window, Ruer watched Grull move away down the corridor. Then she looked at Dean. Her pale gold eyes were very calm and a little tired, like someone who has seen this scene before and knows how it tends to go. Dean looked at the sensor screen, where Warren's fleet sat at the edge of the system like a sentence waiting to be finished. He picked up a wrench, turned it over in his hands, and started thinking. Warren's message arrived 3 hours after Grull's call. It was addressed to Ruer directly, which was notable. Nobody in 4 years had addressed anything to her directly, and it said, in the clipped formal language that military communications favored, "Stand down and submit to Union custody for evaluation and containment, or be classified as an active biological threat. You have 6 hours to comply." Dean read it twice. Then he read the line about containment a 3rd time. He set the message down on the console, picked up his tea, found it had gone cold, and drank it anyway. "What does it say?" Ruer asked from the cargo bay. He read it to her. She was quiet for a long moment. Her tail moved slowly across the floor, the tip tapping a pattern he was starting to recognize as thinking. "I have heard the word containment before," she said. "In the Second Fleet report about me 4 years ago, they used it 7 times in 3 paragraphs. That's a lot of times." "Yes," a pause. "What are you going to do?" Dean set down his cold tea. He looked at the communication console. He looked at the outpost's broadcast array, which could reach every civilian relay station in a wide arc around this system, because the outpost had been built during a period when relay stations were considered a public utility and had been equipped accordingly. He thought about Grull, who was currently in the security office running through his protocols and probably feeling very good about having a protocol to run through. Something inadvisable, he said. He started pulling up the broadcast interface. He opened every channel the outpost could reach: fleet bands, civilian relays, Union public communications, trade frequencies, the slow long-range network that carried news and personal messages between star systems. He opened them all simultaneously and locked them so they could not be individually overridden from inside the outpost without physically cutting the relay lines, which was a process that took about 40 minutes. He turned on the cargo bay camera. He aimed it at Ruer. Then he sat in front of his own panel and spoke. He did not make a speech. He did not use dramatic language. He spoke the way he always spoke, which was plainly and at a reasonable pace and with the occasional pause to get the wording right. He described the situation. A draconi hatchling, alone in space for 4 years, had made peaceful contact with a maintenance outpost. He described what that contact had looked like: the clipped sensor array, the apologies, the card games, the navigation techniques that were more accurate than anything the Union currently used. He read verbatim the log entries from the past 4 days, including the one where he had written sensor array damage minor, see attached photograph, draconi contact confirmed, non-hostile, she apologized. He presented Ruer's 4 years of recorded peaceful transit through Union-adjacent space without a single incident. Then he stepped aside and handed Ruer the open microphone. She looked at it for a long moment. "You can say whatever you want," Dean said. "It's going out to everyone." She looked at the camera. Somewhere out there, across the relay network, an unknown number of people were looking back at her, or they would be, when the signal reached them. She thought about the 43 languages and what she had said to herself in all of them during 4 years of nothing. She thought about the delegations that had screamed, and the shuttle that had almost fired, and the message that used the word containment 7 times. She spoke in galactic standard, slowly and clearly. She told them she had been watching their signals for 6 years. She described the festivals she had seen on long-range sensors, the lights over the Luarani coastal cities, the racing circuits on Veth Station, the agricultural displays that certain farming worlds broadcast as a kind of public pride. She told them she had learned their languages because she wanted to be able to say hello. She said she did not know what to do about the fear. She had tried being smaller, slower, lower, quieter, and none of it had worked. But she was willing to keep trying if someone was willing to try from the other side. She asked, very simply, if anyone knew whether any other draconi had survived. The broadcast ran for 11 minutes. When it ended, Dean closed the microphone but left the channels open. The fleet responded first. 2 patrol ships moved toward the outpost at a pace Warden, probably intended to look measured but read as aggressive on sensors. They reached close range, and then the thing happened that always happened. The crews hit the wall of it, that deep wordless animal certainty, and the ships moved wrong. One overcorrected sharply to port. The other slowed without a command from its helm, and then moved in an uneven curve that was not any kind of military maneuver. Both drifted clear. Dean noted the time. He noted that Ruer had not moved, had not displayed, had not so much as spread her wings. He logged it. Then a private channel opened. The identifier was a Union Council vessel traveling with the fleet as an observer. The voice was old and slightly reedy and spoke in the careful way of someone who had learned, over many years, to mean everything they said. "This is Counselor Sepher," it said. "I would like to speak with the Draconi, and I have a question for the maintenance technician." "Go ahead," Dean said. "How did you manage to simply talk to her when no one else could get close enough?" Dean thought about Badgers, the colony that had lived behind his family home, low-slung and fierce and deeply misunderstood, which he had spent childhood afternoons watching until the watching became familiar and the familiar became ordinary. He thought about how the neighbor children had refused to go near the yard and how he had eventually stopped understanding why. I grew up next to something that looked scary, he said. You get used to it, then you notice it's just an animal trying to get through the day. A long pause from Sepha's channel. I have been trying to get draconi's sentient status onto the council floor for 2 years, she said. Nobody was willing to sit in the same room for the vote. She beats everyone at cards, Dean offered, if that helps make the case. Another pause, and then, very quietly, what might have been a laugh. The Union Council session was not held in a room. It was held over relay, which meant it was held everywhere at once, in the offices of 41 member species, on the bridge of Warden's flagship, in the cargo bay of outpost Solara 9, where a small camera sat on a crate and fed Ruer's image to a screen that fed it to the galaxy. Sepha had called the emergency session. She had called it loudly, using the kind of procedural language that left very little room for polite refusal, and she had cited the broadcast and the logs and the 11-minute transmission in which a draconi hatchling had described watching their festival lights from a distance for 6 years. The council had assembled with the particular reluctant speed of people who know something must be dealt with and are not looking forward to dealing with it. Dean was called to give an account. He did not dress differently or prepare a statement. He sat in front of the cargo bay camera with his maintenance log open and answered questions the way he answered most things, one at a time, in order, without flourish. A Keth representative asked if he had felt at any point that Ruer was dangerous. Dean said no. The representative asked if that was not simply a failure of appropriate caution. Dean said that appropriate caution meant calibrating fear to actual evidence, and the actual evidence was that she had apologized for clipping a sensor array and since then had not damaged anything except 3 conduit bundles by accident during a navigation problem they were working through together, and she had apologized for those too. A Luarani delegate asked if he had any scientific or biological basis for trusting her. Dean said the biological basis was that his biology had not told him to run, and the scientific basis was 4 days of direct observation. This answer did not satisfy the delegate. Dean said he understood and that it was still the only answer he had. Then the questions turned to Ruer. She answered everything slowly and without any of the defensive positioning that the council members seemed to be bracing for. She described herself with the same accuracy she used when describing astronomical formations, not flattering, not minimizing, just clear. She described what the fear response looked like from her side, the way people's faces changed before she had done anything, the way voices went high and feet went back, and the decision to flee happened in the body before the mind caught up. A Vethian representative, whose species communicated largely through bioluminescent pulses, asked through a translator, "Do you understand why they fear you?" She was quiet for a moment. The whole relay network was quiet with her. "Yes," she said, "I understand it the way someone with a loud voice understands that they startle people in quiet rooms. I did not choose it. I cannot change it. I can only choose what I do with the space it creates." The vote on provisional sentient recognition ran for 2 hours. Sepha argued, carefully and at length, about the legal framework and the precedent and the recorded evidence of language capability, cultural memory, nonviolent conduct, and what she called demonstrable social intelligence, without specifying the card games. Warden argued, through his representative, that provisional status created legal complications around the hazard classification, and that the risk profile of a draconi, even a juvenile one, was not something the Union should absorb without fuller study. The vote was close. It went down the middle for a long time. The deciding vote came from the Solath, a small species with no visual system at all, who perceived the world entirely through sonar and chemical signal. They had no fear response to Ruer because they had never seen her. They had heard her voice on the broadcast. They had processed the 11 minutes of her speaking and run their own analysis, and their delegate said simply, "This is a person," and voted accordingly. The provisional recognition passed by 1. Grull, watching from the security office, said nothing. He pulled up his protocols folder and found, as Dean had correctly noted, that none of his protocols technically applied to this situation. He closed the folder. He went to make something hot to drink. He did not speak to Ruer, but he did stop standing in the cargo bay corridor, which was its own kind of progress. Warden's response came fast. He could not override the council vote. He was too visible after the broadcast for outright force. But there was a gray zone in Union transit law, a provision about temporary relocation of potentially hazardous biological entities in navigational corridors, and he moved into it with the efficiency of someone who had spent a career finding gray zones and moving into them efficiently. He filed the paperwork in 3 minutes. He launched the containment drones in 4. They were remotely piloted, no crew aboard to be affected by proximity to Ruer. Small, functional, designed to attach anchor points to large bodies and run relocation protocols. They came in from 3 angles, slow and precise. Dean watched them on the sensor screen. He thought for approximately 45 seconds. Then he went to the equipment locker, took out his work suit, and suited up. Ruer watched him from the cargo bay. "What are you doing?" "Going outside." "Why?" "Because the drones are remotely piloted, which means someone is watching a screen somewhere, which means they can see what happens." He sealed the helmet. "And what is going to happen is that I am going to stand between them and the outpost." Her eyes did not change expression the way human eyes did, but something in them shifted. "You are one person." "Correct." "In a patched work suit." "Also correct." He checked the tether. "Against 4 containment drones from a Union admiral's fleet." "That is an accurate description of the situation, yes." He moved toward the external hatch. "She asked how I talked to you when no one else could. The answer is I never learned to confuse frightening with dangerous. Warden is frightening. He is not right. There's a difference." He opened the hatch. "Enjoy the view. This is either going to work or it is going to be a very short story." He stepped outside. The drones were 60 meters out and closing. He spread his arms slightly, not dramatically, just enough. A man, small against the black, arms out, standing in the way. On Warden's flagship, on Sepha's observer vessel, on every relay station still carrying the open feed, the image appeared on screens. The drones slowed, not because their programming told them to. Because Warden was watching, and so was everyone else. And a lone human in a patched work suit, arms slightly out, standing between a fleet and a dragon, was the sort of image that, once seen, did not become unseen. The drones stopped. The image traveled faster than Dean did. By the time he came back inside and took his suit off and put his cold tea in the warming unit, the image was already moving through relay networks, attached to several thousand different messages, being discussed in 40 languages across 20 star systems. Someone had titled it The Maintenance Man. Someone else had retitled it The Most Stubborn Human in Explored Space. A third version simply had no title at all because the person who shared it could not think of anything to add. Dean read 3 of these messages, found them embarrassing, and closed the terminal. Warden recalled the drones without explanation. Later that week, he was called before a Union oversight panel, which was not quite a punishment, but was the specific kind of inconvenience that told a career officer exactly where he stood. He was not removed from command. He was, however, reassigned to a patrol route on the opposite end of Union space from Solara 9, where there was very little of interest and certainly nothing that would appear on every broadcast relay simultaneously. Sepha was given expanded authority to lead what the council called, in the careful language of new things that needed careful names, the Draconi Contact Commission. She sent Dean a message thanking him. He wrote back asking if the commission had a budget for structural repairs, because his cargo bay still needed the center struts reinstalled, and he had fallen behind on his maintenance log. Sepha sent a small budget. Dean reinstalled the struts, with Ruer holding things in place and handing him tools, which turned out to be genuinely useful because she could reach angles he could not. Life on Solara 9 rearranged itself around the fact of her. The rest of the crew completed their stasis rotation and woke to find a dragon in the cargo bay and a full month of mission logs that read, in Dean's characteristic style, like the most unusual maintenance report anyone had ever filed. Most of them adapted. One crew member requested immediate return to stasis, which Dean approved without comment. Grull remained professionally correct, which was the closest he came to acceptance, and everyone decided that was sufficient. Ruer learned to move through the outpost corridors without catching the conduit bundles. She stopped apologizing for the storage rack after Dean pointed out he had already replaced what she knocked over and written it off as standard maintenance. She taught two of the crew members her navigation techniques. She translated intercepted signals for the outpost's communication team, which improved their relay efficiency by a margin that a Union technical assessor later called statistically significant and also embarrassing for us. She was still looking. Every night, in the way she had counted nights since before Dean, she ran scans on the old draconi travel routes. The slow, methodical search she had been running for 4 years, looking for anything that moved the way draconi moved or broadcast in the patterns that draconi used. She did not talk about it much. Dean noticed she did it anyway. The signal came in the 3rd month. It was faint and old, and structured in a way that did not match anything in the Union's signal library, but it matched the acoustic records in Ruer's memory, the ones she had carried since before she understood what carrying memories meant. She picked it up on a long-range passive scan at 3 in the morning, station time, and she stayed absolutely still for a long time, and then she went and found Dean. He was asleep. She knocked on his door with one claw, gently. He came out of sleep the way people do when something important is waiting, fast and quiet. She showed him the signal. He looked at it for a long moment. He checked the source coordinates. He cross-referenced them against old draconi stellar maps, which Ruer had been adding to the outpost's navigation system for weeks. "That's 3 months out," he said. "Yes, on a moon orbiting a dim star that nobody has charted recently, because there's nothing commercially interesting about it." "Yes, the signal has draconi structure." Yes, her voice was very level, the kind of level that costs something. He looked at her. She was very still in the corridor, wings folded, all 4 feet planted, pale gold eyes watching him. "I'll file the mission request in the morning," he said. "I'll put you down as navigation specialist, which is accurate." He paused. "You should sleep." "I do not think I can," she said. "Fair enough." He went to the small kitchen unit and put the kettle on. She folded herself into the corridor outside, taking up most of it. He handed a cup through the door. The way he had learned to, without thinking about it. They waited together for the morning. The commission provided a ship, properly sized, with an external platform where Ruer could travel alongside rather than inside. Dean was listed on the manifest as technical liaison, which was the most accurate thing anyone had written about his role in any of this. The journey took 87 days. He fixed 4 things on the ship and let Ruer navigate. They arrived at the cold moon without fanfare, just the 2 of them and a small commission crew landing in silence on a plain of grey ice. The shelter was there. Half-buried, ancient, hull dark and pitted by years of cold, but structurally intact. And inside, on instruments, barely registering, the vital signs of something in deep hibernative sleep, 3 signals, 3 living things. Ruer stood on the ice and did not move for a long time. Dean stood next to her, which was, by now, a thing he did without thinking about it. She reached out and put one claw against the shelter door. From inside, something stirred. His mission report was filed 2 weeks later, after the surviving 3 had been safely brought out of hibernation, assessed by the Commission's medical team, and confirmed as adult draconi, 2 females, 1 male, all alive, all coherent, all asking the same first question in a language that Ruer answered before the translator finished loading. The report was 1 page. It covered the structural integrity of the shelter, the hibernation equipment, the vital signs, the recovery timeline. It was entirely factual and entirely Dean. At the bottom, In a field marked additional notes, he wrote, "Subject Ruer has located surviving members of her species. Status, she is no longer alone, no further hazard classification required. Dean Calloway, Technical Liaison, Solara 9 Outpost." Below the typed line, in handwriting, because there was no field for it. She still apologizes when she knocks things over. Some things don't change. This one I don't mind.